Welcome, everybody, to the next edition of Experience Evolve, the webinar series. As always, I'm so glad you're here. And as we continue to explore how organizations can evolve the way they design experiences across their ecosystem, this series focuses on real-world experience moments, not just policies, and how intentional design across people, processes, and tools creates lasting impact. If you missed previous sessions of the experience strategy phases, return to the office, and more, you can find all those recordings and resources at samanthaelizabeth.com and look for Experienced Evolved. Today, we're tackling a moment that nearly every organization handles, but very few intentionally design: leave of absence. Too often, leave is treated as a compliance process, a checklist, a legal safeguard. But leave is not just paperwork, it is a lived experience. When someone steps away from work for health, for caregiving, grief, or life's transitions, work does not pause. Relationships do not disappear. Culture does not freeze. It adapts. And how the adaptation is handled defines trust, belonging, and retention far more than most organizations realize. I'm Samantha Elizabeth, founder of Samantha Elizabeth Coaching and Consulting, and more than 2 decades working in employee experience and client experience. I now help organizations design experiences or strategies that align people, processes, and tools so performance and humanity reinforce each other instead of competing. My work centers on understanding that experience is shaped in defining moments. And few moments are more defining than others when someone needs to step away. I'm thrilled today to be joined by Jennifer Cortum. She is a SHRM CP, a leave experience strategist, and founder of Strong Foundation Coaching and HR. Jennifer brings over 25 years experience, hey, same as me, of HR leadership experience across organizations ranging from 80 to over 1,600 employees. She has led leave of absence, accommodations, employee relations, and HR strategy in complex environments. What makes her work different is this: she focuses not on compliance, but on connection. Through her connected leaves pathway, which is prepare, sustain, and reignite, she helps organizations build shared understanding around the people experience of leave, ensuring employees do not feel forgotten, disconnected, or left behind. Jennifer, I am so glad you're here today. Thanks for joining the webinar. I wanted to go ahead and start off. Of course, I've already introduced you, and I really wanted to talk about, let's just get into the meat of the topic.
Okay.
So, Jennifer, many HR teams are trained to focus heavily on legal protection during leave. Why do organizations default to compliance first thinking when it comes to leave of absence?
Basically, compliance is something that, since organizations are required to do, it often becomes the foundation because it's the easiest starting point. In a lot of areas, especially in leave, the expectations are laid out in regulations. So again, it makes it an easy starting point. And also those items can be measured.
Very true. Very true. I know that that definitely happened, during leaves that I needed to take from the corporate world. And, I do find that it felt very sterile, in a lot of ways when working with somebody, and especially like, hey, this is a person that I actually know and that I work with. And all of a sudden they've kind of gone into this like very formal mode with me during that time, because that's what their policy says. It says how to treat a leave. So what gets lost when compliance becomes the only lens, though?
Oh, I love this question because the first thing that comes to mind is a lot. So one of the primary areas that I always think of, though, is it's the people experience of leave that gets lost the most. And that does include a lot of different things. But the people experience of leave includes experience for HR, for managers, for their team, and the employee on leave. So it's not just one person. And that loss here becomes significant overall when we think about retention and engagement.
Hmm.
It it just blows my mind when I think about a recent AFLAC study said that approximately 41% of employees covering for a colleague on leave reported experiencing burnout. 41%. That is just wild to me.
Yeah.
And yeah, and so when you have that burnout and that retention rate that is so costly, that loss really makes a significant impact everywhere in your organization. So,
Yeah.
another recent study showed that employees who report positive leave experiences are significantly more likely to remain with their employer long term.
Mm.
Again, that retention component is super important.
Yeah, definitely. I can really see that, as being somebody that went on leave and having to leave all my coworkers with all the work, that we were working on, or, just being the one, that had to take over work during that time. And of course, a lot of people absorb that work, and sometimes it's a lot of work.
Well, it's tremendous, and the difficulty, I think, in leave of absence is that you're so busy trying to survive
Mm,
that you forget about communicating, "Help, I need help."
yeah.
And sometimes in some cultures, they're like, "Just do it. Just live
Mm,
with it. It's
right.
your responsibility."
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I think a lot of times in the US, it's like that, just live with it, right? Just take it on,
Mm.
and I know that, definitely I've had managers, that have come to the team and said, like, "So and so is going on, maternity leave," or, just any type of leave, and it's like, "All right, team, we gotta pull together, we gotta get this work done, and, who's taking what, and dividing up all of the work, and you just kind of like have to buck up, basically, and say, this is it, like this is what we're doing. And you just live with it. But you don't feel like you can communicate to your manager that, hey, I'm feeling very overwhelmed. Or perhaps sometimes that the responsibility of the person that's going on leave, their work responsibility goes to one person rather than the whole team. And so somebody's kind of doing double duty for however long that person's out.
Right, and in some instances, the manager and the one employee that's on leave are the team, so everything resorts back to or falls back to the manager.
Yes.
And then that manager faces burnout because now they're doing 2, 3, 4 jobs, with everything that's associated with that. They're learning new things, they're having to adapt, and it is really, really stressful. And that's why that leave experience is really inclusive of everybody that it touches,
Yeah.
including HR, because
Mhm.
HR can get frustrated.
Yeah. Yeah. Very
Uh,
true. Very true. I mean, because they're having to sometimes deal like in with the employee relations too, with employees coming to them and feeling like they can't even talk to their manager, about it. So they go to employee relations and say, how do I resolve this?
Absolutely. And I know I was talking to somebody the other day, and what they were telling me is that they were so frustrated in HR because they couldn't get the medical notes that they needed. And so
Mm.
they were having to basically chase this employee who's on leave
Mm.
repeatedly. And when I asked, where is your expectation laid out from the get go? And they just kind of looked at me like, um, um, um. So, yeah, those
Yeah.
those experiences can really make a difference for everyone.
Definitely. And that kind of answers the next question that we had, which was really about the emotional experience of leave, what it looks like from the employee's perspective. But we touched upon, of course, what does it look like for your team members' experience and your manager and HR's experience too. Do you have anything else to add to that?
You know, the one thing that I always share with people is that what I see most often in everybody who experiences leave is vulnerability and uncertainty.
Mhm.
And the vulnerability shows up in many, many different formats. But I think a little bit more importantly is the uncertainty.
Mhm.
Everybody's looking at it from their own perspective. and they're forgetting about the other people's perspective.
Yeah. Very true. And other people's perspective too. And that kind of brings something else to mind too, is that when somebody does go on leave and the team members are left with their work, they might not know how to do that person's work or do it the way that they were doing it before. And so there might be inconsistency in quality, of the work, or it might take some people some time to like figure it out. It's not as efficient as it was before. And that could lead to a lot of frustration too.
Yeah, and that's part of where that vulnerability shows up because not only is it in the process and the flow of work, it's in the individual people who are now assigned those tasks because
Yes.
maybe they don't feel confident
Mm.
in doing them. So again, that vulnerability shows up in various ways.
Yeah, yeah, and I know that some people probably fake it until they make it, in that
A
aspect, and that
lot.
might actually hurt customer or client experience.
It does, I think, every moment of every day, and it shows up more frequently than we realize, and
Mm,
part of that is because when somebody goes on leave, everybody gets a little bit busier in different ways.
mhm.
Maybe not because they are directly performing the tasks of the person on leave, but they
Yeah,
still have to take on something a little different, even if
yeah,
it's a stress they're taking on, of trying to figure out how to schedule or whatever it may be. And that impacts client experience every moment of every day.
definitely. It's all related, right? Employee experience,
Absolutely.
client experience.
Mhm.
So, I know we already touched upon this, but, what are, employees most afraid of when they go on leave, do you think?
Yeah, there's a couple of different things that I can say from personal experience, and I think the biggest one that I see is reduced income because a
Mm,
lot of people go on leave and they don't realize how significant of an impact that reduced income can be, and then they're not able to pay bills.
mm,
Plus, if they have a serious health condition themselves and they're having to pay additional expenses for their health care,
mm,
which again is an uncertainty. They don't know, how much,
yeah,
and or they get into their leave and then something else happens, but that
mhm,
reduced income is probably the top fear that I see.
yeah,
I know that one of the studies, I believe it's from the US Department of Labor, has
mhm,
said that 66% of employees without full pay during leave report financial difficulty. And again, I mean, that's two-thirds of the people that are on leave. That is
mhm,
wild.
yeah,
And sometimes there's no way to prepare for it because
mhm,
leave can happen at a moment's notice. So the other fear is losing their job. And there's some other things that are kind of connected to that, which is damage to their reputation, maybe missed opportunities. There's also an emotional and mental health part of it, which is
mhm.
being seen as replaceable, falling behind on their work, losing connection with their work, which is part of their identity.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
all of those things can be fears. So again, I'm going to cite a couple of different statistics here that I just again blow my mind. In that 31% of workers fear workplace repercussions, such as being fired, laid off, or passed over for promotion, for a increase in wages, things like that.
Mm,
And the flip side of all of this is that 45% of employees who needed leave but didn't take it cited fear of job loss as the reason for not taking leave.
yeah.
And then you even go further on that, and low wage workers are at 64%
Wow.
don't take leave. So to me, what this says is that, okay, they're not taking leave, they're pushing it off, they're doing all these other things to kind of get by.
Mhm,
Well, what's happening with the potentially serious health condition, either for themselves, a family member, or in some states, it could be a family friend?
mm,
Um, you know, what's happening with that need for them to take that leave?
Yeah.
Does it just keep getting worse and worse and worse until it's so bad that they have to take a longer leave?
Yeah. Oof. That's
Yes.
really hard because I know that, being in health and wellness, it's one thing is that I do encourage people like take time to rest, take time off, that sort of thing. But it is really hard to do that. Especially, for people that want to be productive, and, they feel like that's not very productive, to take time off or take time for themselves because they feel like they have other people to care for. But if you're not taking care of yourself, then you're not going to be able to take care of others and especially your job too. So it's so important for that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely it is.
So you shared a story about being told that employees on leave should only communicate with HR and not their managers or teams. What happens when organizations unintentionally sever relationships during leave?
Yeah. It's basically, to me, 4 things happen in sequence, and
Mm,
they can kind of loop back, but, the sequence is silence, uncertainty, distance, and disengagement. So silence creates uncertainty so that the employee isn't sure where they stand. They're also uncertain whether anyone is really thinking about them anymore, kind of
mm,
out of sight, out of mind.
yeah.
And that's a pretty difficult place to be in, especially when you're dealing with significant personal issues that you need stability somewhere. And
Mhm.
work typically fills that role for people. Not always, but that's pretty typical.
Yeah.
And then uncertainty can become distance. And when the way I think about this is that without simple human acknowledgement, the employee on leave starts to feel emotionally separate
Mm,
from their workplace, their team, their manager, whoever it is that they're bonded with at the workplace.
yeah.
And then from distance becomes disengagement. So their motivation and their confidence begins to fade the longer this silence really continues. And that's when some people really, really begin to question whether returning to work is even the right choice.
Very true, very true. I feel like there's also an element of, FOMO, as the kids say, fear of
It's
missing out,
true. It's
right?
true. Yeah, and the reality is that silence is really neutral,
Mm,
and that silence can really be interpreted as, "I've been set aside and forgotten when I'm gone."
yeah.
Who really wants that? And that does create some FOMO,
Mm,
definitely going on there. It's again, I think managers believe that, "Oh, if I'm not saying anything, then definitely, you know, everything will be okay. I won't
mhm.
say the wrong thing, I don't have to worry about it, and I'm busy doing other things." And I've actually heard HR practitioners say that too. I always kind of give them a funny look that they probably don't appreciate, but, that silence really does more harm than good.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely, and I think that there's that whole, fear too, of when somebody goes on leave and they're working on a project and it's kind of their baby. And somebody's going to take it over during that time. Are they going to mess up my project? Are they going to completely change it? So when I come back, I have to work in a new environment for my project. I mean, there's all of those kind of like unknowns. And because, of policies, there's a lot of silence. You're absolutely right. And that silence can create a lot of anxiety for people during that time. I know
Yeah.
for me, like when I went on maternity leave, I was kind of checking in sometimes, going, "Hey, how's it going?" Because we were about to go through a reorganization when I went on maternity leave. And I was so afraid of like, what role are they going to give me? Like how are my projects stopping? Are they going to continue to go? And I had so much anxiety that I was checking in with my manager. We had a good relationship. But I
Yeah.
was checking in with her going, "Hey, how's it going?" And so after the 7 7 weeks that I was on maternity leave, I got back and she's like, nothing's changed. And I'm like, okay, good. Because I was so afraid, of that, so I wasn't silent during that
Yeah.
time, but I think that's also some of what of the psychological safety that you can have with your manager as well, to be able to
Yeah.
still engage when you're not supposed to, and, be able to kind of just check in and make sure, because of that fear that everything's going to change. And it's kind of like, to me, it's kind of like those dreams that you have, like when you go back to school in your dream and like you have completely missed, or you go back to an old workplace or something and you've completely missed weeks or months of work, and you come back and everything's changed and everybody's different. And, like you missed a lot of meetings and all of this kind of stuff. Is that, to me, it's that fear.
Absolutely. And I think it's interesting because I want to kind of tweak a little bit of one thing you said, which is
Mhm.
that, having that relationship with your manager where you can check in and find out how things are going. And there is a way to do that where you still don't really get into work. And that is your manager could simply reassure the person on leave that hey, we're hanging in there. Everything's steady. We are good. You are okay. And it's not really addressing exactly what's going on, but it's still giving the person on leave reassurance that you really are okay. Take
Yeah.
care of yourself.
Yes.
You come first right now, and you
Yep.
have to remember that.
Yeah, definitely.
And yeah, and sharing that can go a long way to reducing anxiety.
Hmm. So, how do you think that this impacts belonging, trust, and return to work engagements? Let's talk about like returning to work after the anxiety of being out and
Yeah.
everything.
Um, Returning to work is, I think, a culmination, or it should be a culmination
Mhm.
of a lot of different things in the beginning part of the leave. And when I think about like returning to work and the belonging trust and all of those things, they're they're all intertwined and they
Mm,
all unravel together.
okay.
So if belonging weakens first, then trust will weaken, and then your reintegration or your reentry to the workplace for the employee on leave is going to be really, really difficult.
Yeah.
So if I break that apart a little bit, the belonging weakens because silence signals exclusion.
Mm, yeah.
Even when it's unintentional,
Hmm.
silence still signals exclusion. So
Yep.
that connectivity, even if it's basic connectivity, a text, an email, a card, a something that says, "Hey, I'm thinking about you, employee on leave,
Yeah.
and I really hope that you're doing well.
Hmm.
Take care of yourself. We're doing fine." That reassurance that we just talked about can go a long way to making sure that the belonging feelings continue,
Yeah.
which then in turn will reinforce trust. If
Mhm.
trust is weakened, then basically that confidence in the relationship with the manager becomes very fragile, or I often call it brittle, because if you touch it, it can shatter.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, that's all that you're saying, is really helping, I hopefully helping people, to kind of see the connection between, the compliance aspect of leave of absence and, also the human touch to it as well, and what people are experiencing. Because if you've never gone on leave, before, which some people have not, and hopefully they're not going towards burnout, but they don't know that experience and what that is like. And you know what? And in actuality, some people could be going on leave and saying, I don't care, like about my workplace. They're already in
Right.
disengaged though for work.
Correct. But the difficulty, I think, that most managers, and to some extent the teams and HR are going to have is that you have to treat everybody as if they're a valued member of the team,
Yes.
regardless of whether they are or not. When they're on leave, they're a valued member of the team. You have to anticipate that they're going to return, and you have
Yeah.
to, build that in so that the return to work engagement, that reentry becomes I want to say a given,
Mm.
but it becomes relational, not logistical.
Yeah.
And that should be the given right there.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about leave conversations. So of course, when it happens, and sometimes it happens, where you have months, in advance, if there's some kind of surgery scheduled or something like that, or maybe, pregnancy, of course. But sometimes it's sudden, when, it happens with people. So what practical support do managers need to navigate leave conversations appropriately and confidently? And let's talk about both, emergency wise and also like it's coming, maybe in months.
Yeah. I think in general, managers need practical guidance that builds their level of confidence in how to stay connected while
Mhm.
still respecting boundaries. So essentially, giving them guardrails,
Mm.
guides. I call it building a shared understanding of let me try that again. Goodness. A shared understanding of the people experience of leave.
Mm.
And the reason why I call it a shared understanding is because this is what clarifies roles and expectations across HR,
Mhm.
managers, teams, the employee on leave, and on leadership. And it really brings together the purpose of connection during leave.
Mm.
So people can start thinking for themselves rather than making up random things of why somebody's on leave, how long they're going to be on leave,
Mm.
what's going on in their absence, all of those things. If you have a shared understanding, everyone knows what they're supposed to be doing to a certain degree. You
Mhm.
still have to leave it open so that, again, people can adjust, people can think for themselves, but those clear guardrails that are put in are critical because then everybody knows what is appropriate to say and what is not.
Oh, yes. And that is like very difficult for a lot of people. Is what do you say? And making sure that you're communicating appropriately. So
Well,
it sounds, oh, go ahead, please.
I was just going to say also, people will know who is supposed to be communicating with the
Oh.
employee.
Mm.
Because that's the other expectation that comes out that, HR thinks that the employee or they know that the employee is connecting with the manager, but then the manager isn't letting HR know anything because,
Mm.
"I'm not supposed to be talking to the employee,"
Yeah.
or, "I said something I didn't, and I know I should not have said to them."
Mm. Mhm.
Which is more often than not. And it's not that it's a bad things per se, it's
Yeah.
that that manager hasn't been given the tools and techniques to feel confident enough to share what's going on.
Yeah. Well, your work is so important for all of this, because it is awkward, for a lot of people, during this time. So let's talk about the levels of in an organization or a business that you work with, and let's actually talk about your framework too, and what do you advise them on?
Yeah. So I do a three-phase framework and it's
Mm.
called Prepare, Sustain, Reignite. And we've talked a little bit around each of these pieces, but prepare is really about way, way, way before a leave even begins or is considered. So you want to prepare that far in advance so you have a shared understanding of everybody's roles, just like we
Mm.
talked about. It's basically laying out the expectations. So when a leave does come up, and everybody's stressed because, oh my gosh, this key person, that does so much in our team is going to be out for 8 to 16 weeks, who knows how long, you know kind of generally what you're supposed to be doing and what your role is. So you don't have to be so stressed about that. You just
Mm,
have to be concerned about what do I do next?
yeah.
And then that's where the sustain comes in. So if we think about sustain, it's basically what's going on in the middle, that meat of the leave of absence. And it's staying in communication with the employee on leave, but it's also staying in communication. And I'm thinking from the manager perspective right now with HR, it's staying in communication with other team members that are covering for leave.
Mm,
And it's following what is happening within that team dynamic so that the manager is aware. They may not necessarily be the one tracking it, but they are aware of what adaptations are occurring in the
mm,
tasks that have been reassigned, because that's going to come back in the next phase of reignite.
yeah.
And it's really, again, important that sustain is like the foundation. Maybe like you're building a brick wall, and the prepare is the sand and all the base level. The brick wall is going to be sustain,
Mhm.
and then you're going to make it look pretty. Maybe the top is going to be a different design of the bricks or something like that, and that would be the reignite. So your wall will be finished. But you have to have those foundational components, and you have to keep those connections alive in sustain in
Mm,
order to get to reignite. Um, Basically, like I said before, that connection with the employee on leave is so important because silence really is the silent killer of reentry.
yeah.
Because people may come back and they're like, "Peace out," in 2 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're like,
Yeah. Very true.
"Oh, I just spent all this time and I did," wait a minute. Leave is a natural part of the workplace. It's
Yeah.
not a problem to fix. It's a natural part of the workplace.
Mhm.
So it's really important um, to have that foundation so that reignite, and to me, reignite is about reigniting the passion and motivation and basically the re-engagement of
Mhm.
the returning employee. And it has to be very deliberate in the way it's done, because you can't bring somebody back in and reignite their passion for their work by
Yeah.
dumping everything on them on the first day and go, "Oh, here's your keys, here's your desk. See ya."
Yeah, I know.
Um,
Good luck on
yeah,
catching up.
exactly. "Oh, great. I have 7,243 emails to go through."
Yay.
Yeah. So it's really a very purposeful ramp up,
Mm,
and the manager has to take a very active role in all of this. And it needs to be a role in which they are preparing to reorient the person returning.
mm,
They need to very intentionally reintegrate the person into the team and the team back to the person. Because somebody's on leave and they come back, and let's say maybe they've gone through a near death experience.
oh, yeah.
Maybe they have had that happen with a family member, or something that's significant. Even childbirth. I've never had children, so I don't know that emotion that goes along with it, but I know
Mm,
enough people have talked to me about it, that it's a pretty significant change
yeah.
mentally and emotionally in an
Oh, yeah,
individual.
definitely.
So are they gonna be the same person mindset-wise, heart-wise,
Yeah.
and motivation-wise as they were when they left? The manager has to find that out.
Yeah.
You have to make sure that that fit is still there. And
Yeah.
if it's not, you need to be prepared, and that's part of that prepare component,
Yeah.
to figure out how to help that person. Maybe they're no longer in the right seat, but they're still a great fit for your organization. What do I do now? So again, you're reigniting that passion, you're reintegrating, but maybe you're not reintegrating them into the same position that they had held.
Ooh,
And that's a hard spot to be in. It's a
yeah,
really hard spot for
definitely.
everyone to be in.
Right. I mean, because the employee themselves just went through a change and then they come back to change, based on that. But there's also something to be said, that when somebody goes on maternity leave, some people do, say as they're on maternity leave, why am I putting so much effort into work? I really need to put more effort into my home life. But some people also, I mean, this is what happened to me is that when I got back to work from maternity leave, I got increased responsibilities because they're like, you're a mom now. Like, you know how to handle things. Like, you know how to handle like lack of sleep and all this kind of stuff. And so I got like I got a higher level position, within the company. And it wasn't because I came back and said, well, I'm a mom. I can handle more now. No, they just assumed, that I could. And I did, like, I think like, it went from like 0 to 60, after, I had my
Mhm.
kiddo because, I had to take on more and I wasn't responsible just for myself and for my home and for, my husband, but I was responsible for a child. And they always say, if you want to get something done, ask a busy person. Like, because they for some reason they just can seem to handle the busy and the actions and like just getting things done efficiently and everything. And so I think that's like what how they saw me when I came back, is that I was hungry for more, after having a kiddo. And I accelerated in my career after I came back from maternity leave. But some people don't. Some people come back, and not just about maternity leave, but other types of leave too,
Right.
of, coming back. I mean, like somebody could be out for several weeks, due to surgery. And when they come back, they're hungry, to do that. And so they'll take it. I mean, I'm not going to say take advantage because that's not the right word, but they certainly will look at that and say, oh, they're hungry to get back to work, and let's help them, to be able to reignite, their passion for work again, and really help to take that. And some people might be really resistant to coming back from leave, so you're absolutely right,
Yeah.
checking in with that person and finding out, how did this change them? Did it change them?
Yeah, and the other part of it is that I know it's not necessarily just an emotional side of it, but what about the physical capacity of
Yeah.
somebody? Has that changed? Because, I mean, I remember years ago, I worked with someone who I'm actually very good friends with now, and she was going through radiation
Mm,
for breast cancer,
mm.
and she kept working through the the treatments. I mean, she would go on her lunch period, and it's like I remember walking to her office one day, and she's sitting in there, and she's just stiff, and she's not moving. And I remember saying, "What's going on with you? Are you okay?"
Yeah.
And she's like, and she moved her shirt out of the way, and she was just burned. And I mean, it was like blister burn, and she's like,
Wow.
I'm afraid to move." So we sat down and we talked for a few minutes, and we finally agreed, okay, it's time for you to, decrease your workload. And she was scared to death to leave because she thought she was going to be fired.
Mm.
So, we talked about the issues on that, and no matter how many times I spoke about it, she still wouldn't believe it. So I had a great relationship with her director, so I got her director came in, and he actually was saying the same thing I was, and it really made a big difference for her. So she was out for about 3, 4 weeks. That was it, because she was at the very tail end. But I
Mhm.
remember her coming back, and she was just dragging, and she's like, I can't work the 60 to 70 hours I've been working. I can't do it anymore."
Oof, yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know of many people who could. So we
Mhm.
had to adjust our expectations for her return. And it took some doing, but it was really a very healthy thing for the organization.
Mm.
And we were able to actually move some of her duties consistently to the person who had been doing them and she was learning and growing and going to become a senior person like this individual. And
Yeah.
so it really worked out well. But what happens if we hadn't had that option? And that's
Mhm.
what always ran through my mind. But I just remember thinking about that person, and it's funny because I mean that's been over 10 years ago and we still talk about it.
Yeah.
She's like, "Do you remember that?" And it's like, "Oh."
Yeah.
And I just remember seeing her face, and she was so haggard in appearance at that point because she was so tired. She was only sleeping about 2 to 3 hours a night because of the pain.
Yeah. That's hard. That's hard when somebody's going through that and they're not on leave and they're having to put all of that effort back into work still, and some people feel like, can't you keep up? And it's really hard. I mean, there's also like the opposite side of that too, that, if somebody has Cushing's disease, which makes you tired and lethargic. And once you go through that surgery to get rid of it, you have energy again. So you have the opposite effect. You leave work, feeling so tired and fatigued and like you can't keep anything down, going from that to coming back with a lot more energy, because that surgery actually got rid of whatever was ailing you. And
Yeah.
it could have the opposite effect of the leave.
Absolutely. And, when we think about the different types of leave as well, we also need to consider those that have intermittent leave because it can be mostly the same as a continuous leave and the things that
Yeah.
we still need to be doing,
Yeah.
but that support is going to be more of a roller coaster ride than anything else. And that's why it's going to feel pretty much to everybody. So being able to figure out ways to balance that roller coaster.
Mm.
And I'm not sure you'll ever be able to completely get off of it because, I'm thinking of somebody who has a disease where the flare-ups can happen in a matter of minutes and they
Yeah.
just have to up and leave. That's pretty tough for anybody, any
Mm.
organization. But being able to be prepared enough to handle it in stride rather than freak out and go, oh my gosh, what am I going to do now?
Yeah.
Because you still have to be that steady person, that steady manager for the team, for people
Yeah.
around you.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, there's all different types of things that go on in here. And the prepare, sustain, reignite is my way of trying to make sense of the unpredictability, chaos, strain that leave can be and create more of a steady pathway that we can walk down more in a calm and intentional manner.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I can see that. Well, thank you so much. I mean, this has been a lot of great information. Of course, being an employee experience, client experience, let's talk about culture. So, you said how organizations actually handle leave often reflects their broader culture. So, how does a fear based leave culture show up?
Um, it usually shows up as the organization demands taking priority over the people experience. And I
Mm,
use the word demands very deliberately because it doesn't always mean it's organizational need.
yeah.
But it often looks like minimal communication beyond what is legally required, and even then, it's iffy in some organizations because maybe they just don't care about leave. They don't
Hmm.
care, "Oh, I'm too small," or "I'm too this," or whatever, "It's too much of a pain to do it."
Hmm.
But the other thing that I see most often is that there is a rigid control of timelines, of approval of leave
Hmm.
with little flexibility for real
Yeah.
life uncertainty. Okay,
Yeah.
your meds note says that, you're gonna be out from March 1st to March 17th. That's it. You don't get anything else.
Yep.
I don't know. That's pretty harsh. A lot of times they'll use policy as a shield
Mm,
rather than a guide. And I also think of a shield, not just a shield, but a shield that beams somebody on the head, not literally, but
Yeah.
metaphorically.
Yeah.
That it's always, well, policy says, well, according to policy, and
Yep.
that's a very rigid mindset as far as that person on leave feels.
Mhm.
And so the manager ends up treating the leave as a disruption or a problem to fix
Mm.
rather than a normal part of working life. And when that occurs, the person who is going on leave or needs to leave feels like they are the problem to be fixed.
Yeah.
So that doesn't go over well.
Yep.
And then again, we talked about how many people are hesitating to take leave or delaying it out of fear of those consequences. And that's a
Yeah.
typical outcome of fear-based leave culture.
Definitely. I gotta say, that's something that comes to mind is, I work with a lot of companies on, celebrating when somebody puts in their 2 weeks. And I know that sounds kind of odd, but, a lot of times, when somebody, puts in their 2 weeks and they're leaving the company, all of a sudden, they're just, like, kicked in the butt on the way out, and that's a bad part of helping employees and former employees to be ambassadors of the company. All of a sudden, they're, like, blacklisted, and it's the same thing with leave too. Like some people just might feel offended. Oh, you're going on leave? Like, what are we going to do? And it's that whole like, if you're not with us, you're against us type of culture that I see too. Because I have definitely seen some people be excluded from things, because they're going on leave and they're kind of twiddling their thumbs thinking, well, I'm still here, for the time being until I go on leave.
Right.
What can I do? And then all of a sudden it's just that exclusion. It's that um this, like it's their fault, that they have to go on leave too. I have seen a lot of that and that's disheartening. It's not part of a great culture, for a company is to decide that person is not, if you're not with us, you're against us, sort of thing.
Yeah, and what a great way to start out, not, the sequence of basically getting that person to not return.
Yeah.
I mean, you basically at that point, the organization, or I should say really it's the leadership and the management have allowed this to happen, and so that the disengagement has already begun.
Yeah.
So when that person's on leave, more than likely, they are gonna be looking for another position.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Yeah.
It's how you treat people, and that's, something that even though it is compliance driven, it's just um you shouldn't be excluding people, from things.
Well, everybody deserves to be respected.
Mm,
Whether they do their job well, not well, whatever, they are
yeah.
a human that deserves respect because they are, part of your team, a person, whatever you wanna say as far as
Mhm.
that goes. And that disrespect then can fuel incivility.
Mm,
And I'm a big, big proponent of civility in the workplace, big proponent
definitely.
of it. That's an underlying, theme for everything that I do is
Yeah.
civility in the workplace.
Yeah, it's super important for a great experience, for people is to treat them like humans,
Yeah.
and companies often don't think that way. And people have known me to say this before, but it's because a lot of companies are stuck in the industrial age where humans were literally part of the machine to make it go. And so a lot of companies see people as cogs in the machine. And when you look at somebody like that, cogs are replaceable, and that unfortunately leaves people feeling like they're just part of the machine. They're replaceable. If they break down, they're just going to get extracted from the machine and somebody, new part's going to be put in there. And that's very disheartening to people.
Yeah, and that lack of value is again such a part of that fear-based culture.
Yeah.
It's to me, I know it's kind of a pun, but it's frightening,
Yeah.
how that fear-based culture is so pervasive in our culture right now.
Definitely. And I mean, and part of it is like a lot of change, too, because
It
we've
is.
moved from the industrial era, we've moved to the knowledge era, which is a little bit more human focused. We've gone to the computer age. We're going into the AI age.
Mhm.
But, and I know that when people think of like knowledge age, it's very human of us, because we have the knowledge in our brains and from our experiences. We go to the computer age and the AI age, and people feel like we're getting further and further away from human. And
Right.
that's not the truth. The truth is that we're getting closer and closer to what makes us human because we are allowing those other things to be automated so that way we can think in higher value ways, that we can actually create things, that are more human. So
Correct.
it's interesting when hear, people that we went from machines, to knowledge to computers to AI, and then we're just getting
Yeah.
further and further away, but we're getting closer to what makes us human and what makes us tick and how people should actually be treated.
I totally agree. I totally agree. And I think we are in a unique place
Mm,
within our evolution of the workforce,
yep.
and it is so exciting to see how
Yes,
things are evolving and how
definitely.
they're evolving and trying to figure out why they're evolving the way they
Mhm.
are.
Yep,
Um,
definitely.
yeah, it's really intriguing. But yeah, it's
Yeah,
so true.
it is, and I'm excited to see, how this develops too. So let's go to wrap up and give me your final thoughts. So, if you could shift one mindset about leave of absence across organizations, what would it be?
Um, I think that what I would say is that shift the mindset from leave being a problem to fix.
Mm,
And that's basically because leave is a human experience
mm,
and we need to learn to navigate it together. It
yeah,
shouldn't be siloed, it shouldn't be a problem, it should be a normal part of the workplace. And when we recognize that the work and relationships continue, even when someone goes on a leave of absence, we should be adapting rather than trying to keep everything exactly the same.
yeah, very true. Man, you bring up so much great wisdom and knowledge and, just things that, people can really take away from this. So, thank you so much for being on the webinar. So, how can people find you on the web?
You can definitely go to my website of strongfoundationcoaching.com. You
Mm,
can also find me on LinkedIn. I do have a very unique last name. So if you look up Jen Cortum, Jen, and then my last name is Cortum, Cortum, you can find me on LinkedIn or you can search for Strong Foundation Coaching and HR on Google.
wonderful. I will go ahead and include all of your links in the show notes too, so people can be able to find you. Well,
Thank
thank
you.
you so much. I appreciate you being on the webinar. And anybody, if you are also looking for somebody that works in employee experience and client experience, feel free to reach out to me. Thanks for watching the webinar today. Experienced Evolved is for leaders and other people who care about employee, client, partner, vendors, and beyond experience. We have a framework, a newsletter, webinars, videos, and a podcast coming soon, and other helpful content. If you missed any of our previous content, you can go to SamanthaElizabeth.com and look for Experienced Evolved.